the greatest hadith, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, peace be upon him, told us that every single morning.
It seems to me that there's two separate issues about things like the Danish cartoons which get conflated. One is the question about should the cartoons have been published in the first place. Now, it seems to me any newspaper editor, anybody on a picture desk in a newspaper or a magazine, every day is presented with material where they have to make the decision, is this worth putting in the magazine or not? And I think we can also agree that maybe no two picture editors would make the same decisions. Some of them would print all those things, some of them would print one or two, some of them would print none of them. So on the one hand, you've got the argument about quality and so on, should the things be in the paper.
Yeah.
Myself, I think that most of them were rather tedious, and the ones that weren't were actually the most offensive ones. I mean, the best was the one which shows suicide bombers arriving at the pearly gates.
Yes.
To be greeted by the Prophet Muhammad saying, "Would you please stop doing it because we're running out of virgins?"
Yes.
Now, that has the great merit of being funny.
That has a bit of bite to it, yeah.
Yeah. And actually, the one with the turban, the bomb in the turban, was similarly, a perfectly legitimate, strong, satirical point.
And well drawn.
And well drawn. And so those two, the ones that people got most exercised about, would actually be the ones that I would, if I was a picture editor, that I would have published, and many of the others were just beyond bland. So that's one issue. Would you do it, would you not do it? But it seems to me that there's the second issue, which is what you were talking about, I think, is what happens when the subject of violence arises. And at that point, it seems to me the subject changes. The subject is no longer about whether you should publish or not publish these things, but about how do you respond to violence.
Yes.
Do you respond to it with cowardice or courage? And at that point, it seems to me that every newspaper in the world should publish the Danish cartoons. Not because they like them, and not actually because they particularly want to insult Islam, but just to make the point that you don't give in to threats.
Yes.
And so I think sometimes, when people start talking about the cartoons as objects, were they good or bad, were they offensive or inoffensive, that's one half of the point. But the second half of the point is the question of the response to violence. And I think that's one of the things that has got very blurred recently. And one of the most, I think, mealy-mouthed pieces of language that is developed to justify this kind of behavior is a kind of reinvention of the meaning of the word respect. It seemed to me, when I was growing up, that respect meant that you took people seriously. It didn't mean that you never disagreed with them. To respect someone is to say, okay, we'll take on what you have to say, and if I don't agree with it, I will offer a counter-argument. The idea that it would be disrespectful to someone to in any way disagree from their system of belief is a new idea, is a new meaning of the term respect. And it seems to me to have nothing to do with respect. And what it actually means is I'm too afraid to do it. So what you have is cowardice masquerading as respect.
Returning now to our top story, the outrage in the Muslim world over caricatures of the
These old notes made me $43. I uploaded them to StuDocu, and they made me an offer of
like being on the cutting edge of knowledge. The Bible has always been years ahead of scientists and is one of the most advanced science books around.
But you will hear the screams of the damned echoing through your ears forever and ever and ever.
A person that spends his time considering what God has done is just not impressed with what man can do.
Root of All Evil was a slick television program, edited and cut in the way that television programs are, as a sort of polished performance. But in the course of it, I interviewed a lot of people. The interviews often went on for a very long time. Later, I thought it would be fun to look at the unedited, uncut interviews. And the full interview, where you saw people's hesitations and slowings down and pauses for thought, were revealing and, I thought, fascinating. All hail Pete Starr. It seems that nothing terrible has happened to him. I don't know whether I don't know when he comes up for re-election, but I don't think there's any suggestion that he's not going to get re-elected. It may be Charles Bradlaugh, the famous Victorian British atheist, was always going up on platforms and challenging God to strike him by lightning. I mean, I have a similar problem of whether to be honest, because my colleagues in those who teach evolutionary science have a real problem with the subversion of their subject by creationists. Creationists nowadays go under the name intelligent design theorists. And they are attempting to subvert scientific education in this country. And a great many of my colleagues are being forced to waste their time fighting this nonsense. Those colleagues at the pro-evolution lobby are not uniformly fond of me. And the reason is that I and others like me are in-your-face atheists, and I go so far as to say that the main reason I'm an atheist is because I understand the theory of evolution and the evidence for it. I met one of the three lawyers who won the case, the notorious case in Dover, Pennsylvania, and we had a very amicable conversation. And I said to him that it was my atheism. I felt that science, as I understand it, is pretty much incompatible with theism. And he said, "Thank goodness we didn't call you to the stand." and I knew that. I mean, I appreciate that. I've heard it many times before. If I were asked to go and testify on a pro-evolution case in an American court, I would, if I was allowed to, refuse. Because what I know would happen would be that the lawyer for the other side would say, "Mr. Dawkins, is it true that you have been led to atheism by your understanding of evolution?" And I would have to say yes. And he would simply turn to the jury and say, "My case rests." That's all you need say. If you can show, if you're a lawyer who can show that evolution leads to